Okay then. Let's see. Well, we jump on and see if Cypher holds up as well as Cube does.
Why not?
Yes, so it took another 5 years for Natali to direct another film, that being 2002's Cypher, set in that brief window where bleach bypassing was a thing. Jeremy Northam's Morgan Sullivan lives a dreary life as an accountant, but rather than go off to work for his father-in-law's firm, he instead takes a post as a corporate spy for the shadowy DigiCorp. He's tasked with attending and surreptitiously recording the most banal of industry seminars, but we soon find out that things are not what they seem. Meeting Lucy Liu's Rita Foster at one event, she clues him into what's actually going on, giving him drugs to counteract the brainwashing that DigiCorp's been further performing on him to reinforce his assumed identity as a spy to, presumably, better enable future nefariousness. He soon becomes a double agent for rival corporation Sunway Systems, promising him a way out, but before long, things aren't quite what they seem there either. And who's this Sebastian Rooks fellow everyone keeps mentioning anyway? This is not a film that's well suited to a blow-by-blow narrative in terms of recapping, in particular because that narrative is about 98% of the film. Character, by virtue of the slender identities that Northam is inhabiting for this film, is not the strongest suite, and frankly it's to his credit that his twitchy, somewhat eerie performance can drive the film along, with some surer support from Lucy Liu. Still, it's a stylish yarn, and while I don't think this holds up all that well to repeat viewing at all, I liked this an awful lot on first viewing, and I'm sure you did, Craig, as well, because I reread your review. And I liked this rewatch well enough, although curiously the effects work has aged much, much worse than in Cypher.
Oh, yes.
In Cypher than in Cube. Perhaps because there's so much more of it, and it's all entirely superfluous. I believe this was seen as a bit of a Marmite film in its day, neatly splitting audiences into hating it and loved it camps, and I don't think it did particularly well, and has largely faded into obscurity. At least
I don't think it even took $1 million at the box office.
Yeah, I think it more or less went away, and most people have forgotten about it, apart from the people who picked it up on DVD because it's that gloriously shiny cover.
Yeah.
Yes, which is why it took me several hours to actually begin watching it, because I couldn't take the thing out of the box. I'd get distracted by the slipcase. Shiny. What do you think of the direction, Drew? Shiny. Jamie Northam's performance? Shiny?
Can I just point out then, in reference to these things, and I wasn't wrong when I posted in the Slack channel last week that I don't think I ever watched Cypher again after the cinema release. All I remember is Jeremy Northam acting as though he's on heroin and some crap CG stairs or an elevator or something.
More or less, yes.
Giant metal field dildo.
Yes, I wasn't wrong.
Yes.
Field dildo.
How else would you describe that?
Dildo to hell. I'm on a dildo to hell.
I would say it's a film that deserves better than being more or less forgotten. I still quite enjoyed watching it again, and it's certainly a bit more considered than a lot of science fiction these days. So if you haven't seen it already, I'd say it's well worth excavating from the vault and giving it a once-over. Doesn't hold up as well, I think, on a second viewing as it does the first, but that first viewing I really liked, so yeah, I would say give it a go.
Yes, I like this, having watched both these films today. I liked this more than I liked Cube. However, I have also not seen this despite having owned the DVD for a long time. I'm pretty sure I've not seen this since, I think the three of us saw this in the cinema.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And while I had some clear images, I remembered the vault and its unnecessary massive amount of digital storage.
Yes.
And I remember a couple of images, and I remembered Lucy Liu and Jeremy Northam being in it. I remembered absolutely nothing about the plot, so that kept me going quite a bit. Even though, halfway through, it's like, I don't remember any of this, but I know exactly where it's going because, well, I've seen another film. But yeah, I don't think if I were to watch this anytime within the next 20 years again and remembering anything, it's not going to hold up as well as Cube, whereas Cube would hold up to repeated viewing, although I prefer this in a sort of watch once kind of way.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, yeah.
I agree almost entirely with you, Drew. I remembered very little of this. I didn't revisit my review because I couldn't remember that until you mentioned it, Scott. I don't remember writing a review for it on the old site. God knows how that will read nowadays. But yeah, I again, aside from a few scattered memories of it, I couldn't really remember what the plot was about at all. And then, of course, within about half an hour, it's sort of all come back. And then at a certain point, a character's name's mentioned, and I'm like, oh, right, of course, yes, that's correct. Because even on the first viewing, if you can't guess the twist that's coming,
it's barely a twist. Have you heard of conservation of a character? And the film has 4 of them.
Yes, exactly. So there's a bit of purposeful misdirection and stuff, which doesn't really work in and of itself either as you go through. But I don't remember it actually being quite as tightly paced as this. And I really did quite enjoy watching this. There's enough going on within the plot to propel it through that first sort of 80 minutes or so. And while the wheels kind of come off at the end, I feel like it kind of is trying to search for a satisfying conclusion that it doesn't quite reach. I don't think the ending services the rest of the movie as well as it should. It's still a pretty entertaining 90 minutes, and it's very slickly put together.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Northam's one of those actors, I can't think what the hell else I've ever seen him in, although his name is familiar.
He's in Eye in the Sky, he's in Spanley.
I never saw that either. He doesn't seem to be in a lot of stuff. He's not really a household name, I suppose, though weirdly kind of almost is. But watching this, I'm like, yeah, it's actually a reasonable performance, and he makes a pretty good fist of the material at hand. And I mean, it's super plot dense. That, like you say, Scott, it is 98% of the movie is just plot.
Yeah, a criticism it seemed to be going around a lot at the time was that it was too much plot and it was too hard to follow, and I don't get that at all. It seems entirely obvious. This is all quite obvious. I don't understand how. Certainly from a professional critic who's presumably seen a lot of films could find this difficult to follow. It's like, have you seen any film noir which is generally more convoluted than this?
Yeah.
Weird statements.
Yeah,
but,
I just find the plot appealing. It really drives it along, but it's not difficult to follow.
No. I made the mistake of going out to the toilet without pausing it and coming back 2 minutes later and going, oh, wait a minute. And then having to review the previous 2 minutes to catch up, but it's not difficult to follow in the moment.
Yeah,
and it is quite satisfying in a lot of respects. Quite curious, like you say, from an effects point of view, not just the bad CG helicopter and the bad CG field dildo. But
the background's from some sort of,
I was going to say,
1990s Amiga fractal program or something.
There was, yeah. Oh, you get around that though, because it's a brainwashing thing, isn't it? It's very Ipcris file at that point.
Exactly what I was going to say.
But I think what's more noticeable and falls flat in its face now is some early sort of post Phantom Menace use of digital sets, which doesn't work at all when they get into the vault. It just looks really bad now. Although curiously, not really any worse than they did in the Phantom Menace, which, given the disparity in budgets, is and the fact there was only a gap of a couple of years between that film and this. But
what I don't get about all those effects is none of them had any point being there. It's like someone just had given him much more budget than he actually wanted.
Yeah.
It's like, I need to spend this somehow, otherwise I won't get it for my next film. So I'm just going to put in lots of completely extraneous digital effects, and you could tell exactly the same story on probably less of a budget than Cube was.
Yeah, it's like the highways agency trying to use up its repairs budget before the end of the financial year, so they don't get shorted the next time round. And curiously, the thing of it is that there are quite startling images. There are 2 or 3 powerful, quite startling images in this film, and none of them really involve any special effects. There's the first time the conference audience are revealed wearing the headsets and stuff, and then the other time when he boards the plane and basically, the whole cabin's illuminated in yellow and everybody's just sort of lying there unconscious in their oxygen masks. There are these really sort of stark, surreal images that pop up in it, and they're the ones that stick with you. And none of them involve any sort of CG work. It's all basic. It's just practical and lighting.
Yes.
They're probably some of the cheapest shots of the bloody film. And it's just a shame there's perhaps, I felt slightly disappointed there wasn't more of that, because I think in that surreal imagery, especially with Northam's performance being quite so, it's a very sort of dreamlike performance in a lot of respects. He seems very detached and quite hazy in his delivery, as if he's a man who's not entirely there, or his mind is somewhere else most of the time, which makes sense given the plot. Yes. It's kind of a shame that sort of the imagery that plays into that wasn't leaned more heavily on. But listen, it was still, I don't think, again, despite owning it, I don't think I'd bothered to watch it since I'd seen it at the cinema. and I would have Music Magpie the DVD years ago at this point. So I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much this time round, but I really kind of did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think it's going to hold up to repeat viewing.
No.
Because it is so plot heavy, and once you know the plot, you lose the intrigue, you lose the hook. But having entirely forgotten the plot, it really pulled me along. I think the only problem I really had with it, beside the issues we're talking about, Craig, with like CGI and stuff, and some of it being unnecessary, is that. So you're saying, Scott, like for the first kind of 80 minutes, it's pretty solid, and the last 10 minutes kind of falls apart.
I said that, yeah.
It almost feels like a different film.
Yeah.
Because that helicopter at the end, and then the rooftop, and you see the little device in the rooftop, like, it feels like some kind of crappy Bond knockoff now.
Yeah, it feels like something out of Charlie's Angels or something.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
That sort of thing. Yeah, it felt like that kind of half winking, knowing thing, and having that set up in advance.
Yeah,
really?
You could have skipped that. You could have had him just get away and then cut to them on the boat or whatever.
Yeah,
almost, and it wouldn't have felt like it was just trying to pay such kind of, and you could have saved yourself another 10 grand on your bad helicopter effects as well.
Just such a like it dropped in from another film entirely. It
is a shame really that nobody did see it though, because it has got a lot going for it. It's just that ending is kind of feels a bit parachuted in, and I feel like it wouldn't have been too much of a stretch to do something more interesting with it. But 90% of a good movie, fair enough.
I'm just pretty surprised at it though, given that it didn't do well in the US, and you have people talking about it being like one of the best direct-to-video titles this guy's seen all year. Like, it's still got a cinema release here, because we all saw it in the cinema.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but still nobody watched it apparently.
I can't remember under what circumstance we saw it. It must have just been a super limited release, right?
I would imagine so, but I don't know, it's distributed by Film 4, so I guess maybe that's why it was a wee bit different, but...
Yes, Natali, after this, basically what put him into my bozo bin was the film he directed after this, a few years after Cypher, which was Splice, which was absolutely dire. And since then he's basically been doing the very occasional more conventional horror, but actually more, it turns out, television work. So he's done a lot of work for American Gods and various other television franchises, so he certainly kept his hand in the game with some...
his profile's still up there really, isn't it? But he's definitely pivoted more towards telly.
And I think the one thing that runs through the films that I've seen, and I did really briefly flick through Haunted, or Haunter, I think it is called, earlier, which I downloaded. I've not actually seen the full lot, but it certainly looks, just from occasionally, it looks really good. He has an incredible visual style, which I think he's kept throughout his career. So I'm actually somewhat intrigued to go and watch Haunter, even though it's a more conventional horror, which I will almost certainly hate, because that's the kind of guy I am. And also his newer film on Netflix, but that's a Stephen King adaptation, so that's another avenue for me to hate it for. So I may give those a skip, but I'm sure they will look really good while I sit there hating it.
Haunter stuck out for me as well, but I haven't gone so far as to obtain it, because I think it's one of those that I know it'll never get to the top of my watch list.
My experience with Vincenzo Natali begins and ends with Cypher. I've seen nothing else he's done at all. So,
apart from Cube, which you spoke about at some length 10 minutes ago. Oh dear. Yeah. What's the thing he's done recently on Netflix?
Oh, it's In the Tall Grass, I think it's called.
Oh, yes. That kind of stuck out on my recommended list on Netflix, and I had no idea that it was Vincenzo Natali until preparing for this podcast, and I sort of, I should probably look through his biography and see what he's been up to recently.
Yes, possibly. I'll have a look at that and report back in the next intermission podcast, but we shall see.